Liesl and Sue had many times to be together, and Sue has written Liesl's story. And she can tell us some things about that.
Thank you. All of you were so fortunate to know Liesl for such a long time. I knew her for a very short time, but a very intense time. And I grew to care for her very much. In April of 1952, at the age of 25, Liesl boarded the RMS Queen Elizabeth with her young son Bobby, bound for America. In the first quarter century of her life, she had lived through experiences most of us can only imagine. Liesl was born on October 31st, 1926. And even though Germany did not celebrate Halloween, she said she was perhaps a trick-or-treat baby anyway, because her parents were not married. Of course, Liesl's great-parents were rather upset by this turn of events, but eventually all was forgiven, and in what came to be a pattern in Liesl's life, another major event happened in April, this time in 1928, when Liesl's parents got married. In April of 1933, she started the first grade. Adolf Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany a few months earlier, and the school curriculum was quickly revamped to promote the Nazi agenda. We didn't have a lot of fun stuff in school, Liesl says. What we had was reading, writing, arithmetic, and Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. We learned what countries were good and what countries were bad, she told me, and America was bad. But the more I read about it, the more I didn't think so. In fact, I thought it sounded like a pretty good place, and I wanted to go there and see for myself. In April of 1938, the family moved across the Rhine River to the city of Mannheim, where Liesl's father, Joseph Borkel, went to work for Daimler-Benz. The following year, Germany was officially at war. Although life stayed much the same for a time, everyone knew the war was coming to Mannheim because the city started constructing dozens of bunkers to protect against bombs. One of these bunkers was built across the street from what had been a playground, right across the street from Liesl's house. She could stand on the balcony of their apartment building and watch as a giant hole appeared in the ground, and then steel girders and concrete, and then eventually it was all covered up. And all you could see was the opening steps that led underground in the air vents on top. The first bombs fell just before Christmas in 1940 and continued for years. Liesl and her family spent many of those air raids in the bunker across the street, packed in like sardines with their fellow citizens for up to a week at a time, with no heat, little food, and minimal sanitation. Toward the end of the war, when there was no more fuel for generators, they sat in the dark. The only illumination, stubs of candles that people had managed to bring with them. People died in the bunkers, Liesl said, and babies were born there. And each time they emerged, they wondered if they would still have a home to go to. By war's end, more than 90% of the city had been destroyed, but amazingly, Liesl's apartment building, which is still there today, had hardly been touched. In April of 1945, a few weeks before VE Day, Liesl and her family were in the bunker when the doors opened to reveal a half-dozen American soldiers standing in the doorway. "Here comes our rescue," Liesl said. And although conditions remained harsh for a long time to come, for the citizens of Mannheim, the war ended that day. And, Liesl told me, I was ready to go to America. After the war, Germany was divided into 4 zones of occupation: the English, the French, the Russians, and the Americans. Mannheim was in the American zone, and in fact, there has been an American serviceman's presence in the city to this day. The last soldiers are expected to depart in 2015. In 1948, Liesl met one of those handsome American GIs, a fellow named Robert from Peoria, and they fell in love. A year later, their son Bobby was born. But Bobby's dad was shipped back to the States at the end of 1951 to finish his hitch, and it took until the following April for Liesel's paperwork to be in order so she could follow. Unfortunately, at least at first, America did not live up to her expectations. Her marriage to Bobby's dad floundered, and she found herself alone in a strange land with a youngster to support and a limited command of English. But no way was she leaving. "I'm not going back home," she said, "and be the laughing sheep in my hometown." Things were pretty bad for a time. As a matter of fact, as Liesel put it, it was raining birds and bees. So, in one of her lovely descriptions I've come to think of as Lieselese, she said she walked the streets in search of a job. Probably not exactly how we might put it. After a couple of false starts, she found a job she liked, and even better, she met another and much better Robert, a handsome young man from Joliet, 5 years her senior, Bob Moore. And although Liesel probably didn't know this before she agreed to a first date, his birthday is in April. Bob and Liesel married in 1955 in front of the fireplace at Bob's parents' home on Ross Street here in Joliet. Soon after, Bob formally adopted Bobby, and by 1961, the couple had 2 more children, Debbie and Gary. Meanwhile, in 1960, in April, are we surprised? Liesel and Bobby became U.S. citizens. "I am the proudest American," she told me, and she was never more proud of her adopted country than that day. This coming July, Bob and Liesel would have been married for 59 years. During that time, they built a lifetime of memories. Time raising their kids, vacations with the family to state and national parks, time with grandchildren, travels on their own, travels with the American Legion Band, even a trip to Hawaii where they got to meet Andy Williams. And of course, so many work and volunteer activities. I knew even before I met her that Liesel's net spread far and wide, because on the day my husband and I arrived in early December in Joliet, we went to the wrong street by mistake and knocked on 2007, and this woman answered the door, and I said, "Are you Liesel?" And she said, "Oh no, that's the next street over. But be sure to tell her when you get there that I said hello, and I'll bring you cookies over soon." As Liesel and I worked together to record her story, I'd ask her about photos for this, that, or that event, or other mementos, and she'd say, "In the basement, in the basement. All that stuff is in the basement." And I've thought for years about getting it out and going through it, and I thought, I'll do that tomorrow. And then the next day I thought, well, I'll do that tomorrow. And then she said, "You know, I just never thought that someday there wouldn't be any more tomorrows." Fortunately, Bob, Debbie, and Gary helped retrieve some of these jewels from the basement, and other family members sent many photos as well. So Liesel's life story is richly illustrated. One of these gems is an article from a 1957 issue of the Herald News congratulating Liesel on winning a first prize in a recipe contest for her Hunsburger meatballs. Since her kids testified that her cooking skills were less than stellar, this may have been her finest culinary moment. Even more revealing is her reaction to being a winner. The first prize was a gift certificate for dry cleaning, but Liesel was taking no chances on a mere certificate. When she went to claim the prize, she took the living room drapes along. At the end of our time together, I asked Liesel if she had any words she wanted to pass on to future generations. And she had quite a few, but I like these particularly. "Be grateful for what you have," she said. "Say your prayers and never give up. If you do your best, if you do the right thing, the golden lining is always there." Through her love, kindness, caring, and strength, Liesel has left a piece of that golden lining for every one of us. And as we carry it forward into our lives, may we make her proud.